Only the frenzied battle cry of approaching savages could return them to reality and the encampment. For the naked red men were bent on defending their heritage, reddening history's pages with blood, their rage unbounded. The once placid prairie became a battleground where men fought savagely and cruelly, impelled by passionate conviction that total extinction could be the only justice. The government built forts, but the garrisons were widely dispersed. Occasionally, a messenger could escape. And sometime, the cavalry would arrive in time. When the war between the states was joined, troops were diverted even more. The plains were left without protection. Thousands died. Many gave up and returned to civilization. A few bravely settled on the prairies. The administration of the great emancipator had long been dedicated to the organization and development of the western portion of the continent to round it out. Only when the Great War was ended could sufficient troops be sent to defend the settlers, the wagon trails, and the railroad. The signing of the peace with the Indians occurred in 1867. The President of the United States had formed a peace commission, military men, statesmen, and adventurers combining talents that could accomplish an amnesty. Famed scouts such as Kit Carson and Buffalo Bill had searched out the Indian nations to summon them to this council. It was agreed that the site of the ancient and revered Medicine Lodge of the Kiowas near the heating waters of the Medicine River would be the place. It was far from the forts, trails, and railroads of the white man. It also had a pleasant association to the Indians and fine natural shelter and good grass for the many horses and for the cattle being brought by the commission as gifts. General Sherman, General Harney, and Generals Terry, Augur, and Sanborn joined the governor of Kansas, a United States senator, the commissioner of Indian Affairs, a private citizen, and Mr. Henry M. Stanley, a reporter, in the official party. There was endless oratory and debate, seemingly an essential part of every Indian council. Names such as Kicking Bird Crow, Sitting Bear, Little Rover, Painted Lips, Black Eagle were among the prominent figures. There was Chief Satanta of the Kiowas, 10 Bears of the Comanches, Wolf's Sleeve of the Apaches, Black Kettle of the Cheyennes, and Little Raven of the Arapaho among the red men. The white men demanded that Indians must move to the north or south and remain on reservations. The Indian demanded that he must be fed and clothed since his buffalo had been killed, his hunting ground absorbed. 10 Bears' plea summed up part of the Indian problem. I was born upon the prairie where the wind blew free and there was nothing to break the light of sun. I want to die there and not within walls. Why do you ask us to leave the rivers and the sun and the wind and live in houses? Do not ask us to give up the buffalo for sheep. A week went by. There were endless meetings as each provision of the agreement was carefully explained and thoroughly understood. Finally, the documents were drawn and the representatives of the 5 tribes signed it by touching the pen with which their names were written. At one stage, the ceremony was interrupted as one of the lesser chiefs sought to break up the proceedings. But he was overtaken and persuaded to return. In the end, the document was completed, generally providing that the tribes should cease fighting and retire to reservations provided for them. The white man agreed to furnish certain annuities in goods and money, to provide agents and schools, and to protect the peaceful tribes. This was the beginning of a new era. It was typified by events that occurred in Medicine Lodge, the new community. The stagecoach and Pony Express were symbols of communication in the expanded territory. The cattlemen arrived. They liked the open range, the tall grasses, the abundant water. The huge cattle herds created in their wake a maverick among men, the ruthless young wild cowhand. Towns catered to these hands, turned loose at the end of the trail with pockets crammed with money. The citizens welcomed them, cringed a little when an enthusiastic group shot up the town, danced in spurred boots, challenged all comers, and exulted in sin. The town to each was a boisterous oasis in a desert of monotony. Yet each was faithful to his assignment of guarding the longhorns, and many settled in the land that had been won, established ranches and families and a new economy. It was not an uncommon part of history, bank robberies and violence. There was violence in crime and violence in its punishment. That's the way it happened in Medicine Lodge. The leader of the bank robbers was a former marshal of a neighboring town. He was shot trying to escape. The other three were captured and hanged from the limb of a tree still standing in the city park. And yet no civilization has developed except through obedience to law and respect for order. The West went through this stage, the era of the vigilante and quick, violent retribution. Thus, it is not unusual for legends such as the one involving Carrie Nation to affix themselves to a page of history. Carrie was a crusader for law and order, particularly if the law happened to involve spirits, liquid spirits. A piece of brick or a hatchet emphasized her fervent prayers. "I've just had a great vision," she told her followers. "It says to leave the reins alone. Where old Grover leads me, I shall follow. There's where my work will be." Thus, in many ways, is summed up the odyssey of the westward movement. The far-reaching effect of the agreement negotiated here will be forever acknowledged. The frontiersman resumed his quest for wealth, for a place to plant permanent roots of citizenship, for adventure. It took time for the treaty to become effective. Both sides broke its provisions in succeeding years, and blood was spilled upon the plains, but eventually there was peace in progress. To the Indians of this century, the pageant is a serious repledging of the vows made within the treaty by their ancestors. To all, it is a review of amity and mutual understanding, created by time on a framework begun in 1867 at the great Medicine Lodge of the Kiowas.